Hi everyone. I am going to go through the chapter 3 and 4 practice tests. The key is online, as is the MP3 for the first two exercises, the oral exercises. So make sure to go to those as well to help you with studying. So once again, those first two exercises are oral. The first one is the listening comprehension. You will hear the dialogue twice on the video, so you'll be able to see that. The dictée, similarly, you'll hear it twice. You do want to make sure that you're watching out for verb conjugation here because, as you know, several verb conjugations can sound the same but would be spelled differently. A couple of examples, for example, would be ER verbs. Let's say that I conjugated just a normal one here. Je parle, tu parles, il parle. Nous parlons, vous parlez, il parle. And the infinitive is parler. So first of all, you have parle, 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 and parle, all sounding exactly the same. Namely, the E, the ES, and the ENT are completely silent. So knowing and going back into context and clues on the rest of your paragraph is going to help you understand which of the conjugations you're supposed to be getting. Parlons sounds different from all of them, and parler, the ER form, and the EZ form also will sound similar. The way to know between those two is that for parler, you'd be using some conjugation for vous. Parler, the infinitive, usually that's when you'd have a subject and a first verb conjugated before parler. So maybe that first verb here would be some form of aimer or another preference verb, or let's see, what else have you guys had? You'd have avoir envie or avoir besoin or avoir peur de plus an infinitive. So usually it just happens to be the second verb and it's not conjugated, it's therefore the infinitive. So watch out for that. I also want you guys to watch out for liaison sounds and other vowel issues. Remember that for a liaison, for example, you're going to hear the previous consonant. Sometimes it won't sound like the way that it's written. So, for example, sometimes an S with a liaison will actually sound like a Z. A D with a liaison will actually sound like a T. Those are the first two that I can really think of. Then, of course, we've got other problems, vowel problems, like when you have a masculine adjective before a noun, so the bangs adjectives, beauty, age, number, goodness, size. When that's a masculine noun and therefore a masculine adjective, but the noun starts with a vowel, you may have to get a slightly different form that looks similar to the feminine but is spelled differently, but it sounds just like the feminine, like nouvelle, belle, and vieille. So pay close attention to those two, the verb conjugation and the liaison. Of course, we've got just our normal vocabulary, so you'll need to know how to spell those and feel comfortable with those. Moving on to the question personnelle. Remember that in order to approach these questions, you should go through them in somewhat of a organized fashion. One is find out if there is a question word. If there is not, then you're just usually answering with a yes or a no question, or sometimes an either or question. If there is a question word, like a who, what, where, when, how, then you're going to want to answer with information. The second line of action is to identify and also count your verbs. If you have a subject and just one verb, then you're using present tense. If you have a subject and two verbs, and the second one is the infinitive, then you may be using a variety of things, but whatever you do, you want to make sure that you're using that same structure. If you have one verb, you should answer with one verb. If you have two verbs and the second is the infinitive, you should answer with two verbs and use the infinitive. Okay? Third thing that you might want to consider is just watching out for vowels. Usually when you're answering these questions and you have a small word like je, ne, le, me, que, something like that, plus a word that starts with a vowel, all of these will become their apostrophized, if that's not really a word, but we're going to pretend it is, version, if you have the next word starting with a vowel. Or like I said up here, sometimes you'll have a completely different word being used. But just watching out for vowels can be really helpful in catching all those tiny little details. But the idea here is to reuse the structure of what you have. I'm going to let you try to actually do those questions on your own. So if you want to do that without actually having me explain and go through each of them, you may want to pause this video and come back after you've attempted it. Here we go. Let's actually try to go through these using those steps. First one. Est-ce que votre chambre est en ordre ou en désordre? Expliquez. First of all, do you have a question word? It would be before your est-ce que. You don't have one, so this is just a yes or no question. Or it's an either or question. This little word right here, ou, means or. So this happens to be an or question. So let's start with just one of them. Votre chambre est en ordre. Turning votre, although we have not talked about this overtly, will become either mon for masculine things or ma for feminine things. Chambre is a feminine word, so we would say ma chambre. Because we haven't talked about mon and ma and possessive adjectives, if you had just done la here, that would have been perfectly fine. Identify and count your number of verbs. Here's the one verb that we have, est. It's just one, so this is present tense. This is être. You want to reuse that because ma chambre is still a singular third person subject, so it's not going to be transformed. Et. And then let's say that your room is en ordre ou en désordre. You just put that down, whichever one applies to you. Explaining then is going to take a whole nother sentence. So for example, if your room is in order, then you want to give some examples of how that is, such as il y a les vêtements dans la commode. So the clothes are in the commode, or they're put away. Something like that. Maybe your room is in disorder, and then you might say, oh, there are clothes on the floor, which would be par terre. Okay, so just give an example sentence in order to help you explain. Number 2, situation de rêve. Avec qui choisissez-vous de dîner? First part, remember that rêve, it comes from the verb rêver, to dream. So dream situation, ideal situation. Avec qui choisissez-vous de dîner? Do you have a question word? Yes, you do. The question is qui, which means who. So we're asking for information here. Secondly, find your subject and your verb. You have a subject here. You have a verb here. Just one verb here, so that's present tense. But look at this a little bit further. You have de and dîner. Dîner is a second verb, and it's in the infinitive, as you can see from the ER. The little de is important. We'll need to use that in our answer, as is the avec, which is a preposition. So let's unwind this, reuse the same structure. Your vous first will become je. Choisissez is a regular IR verb. Do it for je. Then continue on with the second verb, de dîner. Okay. I choose to dine. Then you go back up to the beginning of the question, which was avec qui, so with whom. So this is where you put avec. And then you put in a person's name, Einstein, for example. Okay? Avez-vous un lecteur de CD dans votre chambre? Let's break it down. Do you have a question word before the inversion? No, you don't. So this is a yes-no question. Find your subject and verb. Just one verb. So you want to reuse that structure. The vous will become je. Avez will become et. I want to watch out for vowels here. So, j'ai. This whole thing then really truly looks like together. J'ai un lecteur de CD. Just copy, paste it down. If you do have a CD player, un lecteur de CD. And you can insert dans ma chambre, once again, or dans la chambre. If you don't have one, you'd answer with, of course, non. So instead of having oui or no here, you change it, right? And then you look for your verb, which is here. And you put your ne and your pas around it. So the negation form here, I'm going to do it down here, would be je n'ai pas. Then the un lecteur de CD, etc. You have to watch out because as soon as you use a negation, your un, une, des, du, de, la, de, l'apostrophe will become de or the apostrophe. Je n'ai pas de lecteur de CD dans ma chambre. Numéro 4. Qu'est-ce que vous portez pour un rencard élégant? Notez les couleurs. Let's think about question words here. Do you have one? The answer is yes. It's que, which means what. Find your subject, count your verbs. Here's your subject. Here's one verb and no other verbs after that. Porter is color. I'm sorry, it's not color, but porter is to wear, and they ask later about the colors. So you want to reuse that structure. The vous will become je. Porter done for je will be porte. Identify the clothing then and the colors. So for example, je porte une robe and I'll use bleu. Okay. My adjective color has to make agreement with my robe, which is feminine and singular. So I add an E to that. So you may want to have to review adjective agreement for colors specifically. Maybe you have des chaussures and maybe they're red. Rouge, chaussure is feminine, but it already has an E. And it's plural, so I'll add an S. Okay. You can do a list by having commas and then your last item having a. Or if you're just doing two objects, then no commas and your a goes here. Pourquoi est-ce que vous étudiez le français? Do you have a question word? Here it is. Pourquoi, which means why. You'll answer pourquoi questions always with parce que plus a new subject and a verb. It's important that parce que be spaced out. It's two words. And spelled correctly with a C, not an S. And also that you watch out for your que here. Your E could change into an apostrophe in the case of your subject starting with a vowel. Finding your subject, vous, verb, étudier, just a single verb. Uninvert that and transform it. Vous becomes je. Étudier becomes étudie. I have a vowel problem. So this whole thing will become together. J'étudie. What am I studying? Le français. Just copy paste it down. Make sure to copy it down correctly, accents and all. Then you explain why. Parce que, and you get to choose whatever you're describing for your reason, subject verb. Maybe you say, I need it. J'ai besoin des crédits. I need the credits pour mon diplôme. For my diploma, or something like that. Or maybe parce que j'aime Paris. I like Paris. Okay. Make sure to just go back and check and watch for any vowels, although we've taken care of the ones that are in front of us. The next section, some form of vocabulary exercise. Here we have making a list of 3 items that are currently on or against the walls of your room, and another list of 2 items that you would need or would like to have there. Use indefinite articles. Indefinite articles are the un, une, and des. Okay. For example, dans ma chambre, il y a une affiche. J'ai besoin d'un miroir. Okay? It may not be exactly this kind of exercise, but just making sure that you are all set to go with your vocabulary, knowing, of course, the gender, the un or the une, and also the meaning and the spelling. Remember also that at the end of your chapter, both for chapter 3 and chapter 4, there's a vocabulary summary list that not only has an audio recording of those words, but has all of the words of those two chapters in one place. Wonderful way to go. Highly recommend that you write them out several times to really get the spelling down to be efficient for your test. Avoir expressions. Your little sister is commenting on everything that is going on in your household. Using expressions with avoir, complete her sentences. So the first thing that we need to make sure to be able to do is know how to conjugate avoir. Avoir means to have. We have j'ai, tu as, il, elle, a, nous avons, vous avez, ils ont. Okay, that little liaison creates the Z sound. Ils ont. Avoir is used with a ton of different expressions. Avoir besoin de, avoir envie de, avoir peur de, avoir faim, avoir soif, avoir sommeil, avoir froid, avoir chaud, etc. I believe that the page for this is page 63, but I am not sure. So the first part of it is conjugating the verb correctly for the subject. So for il, for example, you're going to have a. And then you're going to figure out, given the situation beforehand, what is happening. Michel dit, 10 et 13 font 23. Is this a correct statement? Yes, it is. Therefore, il a raison. Okay? I'll let you take the time to do the rest of those yourself. Make sure to just watch your verb. Adjective placement and agreement. Pluralize or singularize the noun and make the adjective agree. Consider the placement of the adjective and also how that affects the article. So here we go. When we pluralize something, what you're giving is you're giving an article, then the noun, and then the adjective. The adjective in parentheses is going to be given to you as a masculine singular thing. First line of action is to be concerned about the order of the words. Namely, where does your adjective go? Most adjectives go after the noun. However, the Bangs adjectives, beauty, age, number, goodness, and size, adjectives will go before the noun. So know the difference. The second thing is to actually pluralize or singularize, in the case, pluralize the article, the noun, and otherwise make agreement, all agreement, masculine, feminine, singular, plural, for the adjective. So for articles, le, la, and L apostrophe will become pluralized with les, or vice versa, les will become singularized with le, la, or L apostrophe. Un, une will get pluralized with des, and vice versa, des will become singularized with un and une. It's very important that you stay within the same category. So don't pluralize une by going with les. That's the wrong category. And vice versa. By agreement with the adjective here, what I'm talking about is going from masculine usually to feminine. If your masculine adjective already ended in an E, then you don't do anything to the feminine. If it ends in most normal consonants, you will add an E to make it feminine. There's also irregular endings like EUR or EUR or EUX, and that will get transformed into EUSE. IF will become IVE, ER, ERE with an accent, etc. This is irregular stuff coming from chapter 3. There is some as well that are in chapter 4 at the very end. So knowing how to do that, and then pluralizing, generally you're adding an S onto something. Could be here, consonant plus S. This is already done because it already ends in an X, but you could add an S onto this. Okay, for example, so generally you're adding an S, although sometimes it's an X. Okay. The third line here is, of course, watching for vowels. Okay, sometimes that's going to be seen in an article like that. Okay, sometimes it can be seen in an adjective like nouvelle, belle, and vieille. They're masculine forms. Sometimes it's already fixed because of just a liaison, and you'll hear a certain consonant being said, but there's not an actual problem. Finally, the fourth thing is watching out. If you have de plus a bangs adjective, which goes before the noun, your de will become de or D apostrophe. Okay? So for example, let's do this first one first. Une étagère and noir. Think about order first. Is noir beauty, age, number, goodness, size and goes before? Or is it something else and it goes after? It goes after. So we don't have to change the order from where it's written. Then I'm going to change my une to be plural. So une becomes des. Étagère gets an S. Noir needs to get agreement. Étagère is a feminine thing, so an E, and plural, so an S. I don't have any vowel problems. And my adjective is not bangs, and bangs adjective, so I don't have to worry about de becoming de. Let's do the next one. Un rideau with a grand. First of all, think about the order. Grand is indeed beauty, age, number, goodness, size. So it's going to go before. My un will become des. Grand will get an S. Rideau has an irregular ending and will get an X. Looking for vowels, I don't have any problems. But I do have a bangs adjective that's going before, and therefore I'm going to change my de to become de. Okay? I'll let you do the rest of those on your own. Make sure that when you're doing the opposite direction, you're singularizing, that you know your vocab well enough to know which it's going to be, masculine or feminine. I will only give you words that you're supposed to know. Prepositions. Use the correct form of the preposition a or de to complete the following description of Victor, a young student. Reminder on this. A means in, at, or to. Oftentimes we know that we're supposed to be using a versus de simply because of the translation. De means of or from. When I'm using a plus a proper noun, let's see, Sylvie, okay, or à Paris, I don't have to worry about it. Same thing with de Sylvie or de Paris. However, if it's not a proper noun and I'm adding an article to it, I have to remember these rules. A plus le, a plus la, a plus L apostrophe, and a plus le. A plus le will become o. A plus la stays the same. A plus L apostrophe stays the same, but a plus le will become o with an X. me just highlight that. Okay. Same thing for de. De plus le versus de plus la, de plus L apostrophe, and de plus le. The masculine singular, de plus le, will become du. De la and de L apostrophe stay the same, but de plus le also changes to become de. Finally, we have one verb that we talked about that was very important. Jouer means to play. It's a regular ER verb. It can go with a or de depending on what you're trying to describe that you're playing. Jouer plus a sport. Oh, I'm sorry. I should maybe do it this way. Jouer plus a sport or a game of some sort where you're actually trying to win points. Okay, that will use a or some form of a. Versus jouer plus a musical instrument requires some form of de, which could become du or de or etc. Okay, so you use that to first decide in each of these blanks, are you using some form of a or are you using some form of de? And do you need to change it appropriately to become o or aux or du or de? For example, Victor aime jouer blank carte. So here I go, I've got a verb, jouer, that I know can go with either a or de. It's not a simple matter of translation. He's playing cards, which is a game, so I need to use some form of a. Carte is not a proper noun, so, is not a proper noun, so therefore I need to have some sort of article. It's plural, so a and le. These two together will become o. Example number 2. Il n'est pas sportif, mais il joue blank piano. Jouer, once again, you have to choose between a or de, not just based on translation. Piano is a musical instrument, so I'm going to have some form of de. Piano is not a proper noun, so I need some article. It's masculine. De and le together will become du. The next one, il adore aller blank théâtre. It's not jouer, as my previous verb here, it's aller. So now I have to rely on translation. He loves to go in at to the theater or of or from the theater. Which one makes contextual sense? Probably to go to the theater, therefore a form of a. Theater is not a proper noun, no capital letters, so I do need to have an article before it. Théâtre is masculine, so le. A plus le will become o. Okay, let me do this next one. Skip one. Il parle blank politique. He talks in at to politics or of or from politics. He probably talks of or about politics, so some form of de. Politique is not a proper noun, so I need some sort of an article. It says it's feminine here, so la. De plus la doesn't change at all, so I'll fill it in, the blank, with de la. Okay? Hopefully that is helpful and you can try to do the rest of that on your own. Regular IR verbs. First of all, we have a word bank of a handful of verbs. You'll need to know what they mean in order to put them in the right place. As a reminder, agir means to act. Choisir means to choose. Finir means to finish. Réfléchir means to reflect or think about. Réussir means to succeed or to pass, as in to pass a test. So half the battle is finding out which ones go where. The second half of the battle is conjugating correctly. IR verbs. You take off the IR from the infinitive, and your endings are IS, IS, IT, ISSONS, ISSEZ, ISSENT. So for an example, let's say that my verb was réussir. Take off the IR. Oops, double S. There's part of my root. I will just add that plus the endings. So, réussi, 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 réussissant, réussissez, réussissent. Okay, I'll let you do that on your own. Figure out where they go and then conjugate appropriately. Question formation. Your roommate Claude is on the telephone answering questions about himself, his best friend, and French students for your university newspaper. Guess the interviewer's questions based on the underlined phrases in Claude's answers. Doing questions follows a certain number of procedures. The first one, because you're going from response to question, is to choose your question word based on the underlined thing. Your question words would be qui, que, où, quand, combien de, etc. Second, you will, let's see, what's the second thing is transform. Picking between est que and inversion. 90% of the time, it doesn't matter. You can do whichever one you feel most comfortable, except the inversion. If you're using être, you must use the inversion. Okay? The third thing is to transform, if you need to, but to transform and reuse your subject and your verb. What I mean by transform, for example, is if your response is je, your question was in the tu or the vous form. Pay close attention to the context of who is speaking. So in an interview, for example, that's going to be somewhat formal, therefore you'd want to use vous. But if you know that it's a friend or it's the person's mom calling, you're going to be using tu. So transform and reuse your subject and your verb. Make sure that they're conjugated correctly to match. The fourth line of action is filling out any extra words and adding a question mark. Fifth thing is watching out for vowels. That could be a question of putting in an apostrophe, a T with the two hyphens that goes in the inversion. Okay, that's about it. And the sixth thing is watching for dangling prepositions. Dangling prepositions will go and be moved to before the noun that they're referring to, which most of the time for us is the question word qui. Most of the time. I'll do one example for you guys. J'aime la philosophie. First of all, what would my question word be? La philosophie is a concept, so that's considered a thing. So therefore, I'm going to have my question word be que. Then I get to decide est que or inversion. My verb here is not a form of être, so I can use whichever I like. Let's say that I want to use est que. I will plop it in. Then I'm going to transform my subject and my verb. If my answer is je, my question is either tu or vous. Because it's an interview for the newspaper, it's going to probably be vous. I'll change aime to match. Aimer, the vous, aimer, matches now, conjugation-wise. I'll look at any other words in my response. La philosophie was taken care of when I did que. Je was taken care of when I did vous. Aime was taken care of when I did aimer. So no more words to complete. I'll just add my question word. Watching out for vowels, I have a problem here. This is where I'm going to do an apostrophe. Oops. I'll take off this E and make it an apostrophe. So I'm going to just write that more clearly. There we go. Now it's all one word there. No spaces anywhere between any of these letters, although there's a hyphen. I don't have any dangling prepositions right here at the end, so I'm done. Qu'est-ce que vous aimez? If you had chosen the inversion, similarly, you put your question word down first. You don't need to add an esque, but you need to invert your subject and your verb. Watching for vowels, I don't have a problem here, so just the hyphen. But I do have one here, so that will become an apostrophe. No spaces in between que and aimer. There are no other words to fill out, and there are no dangling prepositions, so now I'm done. Let me rewrite it, nice and neat. Qu'aimez-vous? What do you like? Both of these answers would be accepted. I'll let you try the rest of those on your own. Check the key. Finally, a lecture culturelle, reading the passage about Léopold, a francophone student from Senegal, that's important information, West Africa, and indicate whether the following sentences are likely, probable, or unlikely, peu probable. Léopold est de Dakar. Il est étudiant à Paris et il loue un petit studio près de l'école des Beaux-Arts. Il a des affiches de Picasso, de Matisse et de Magritte au mur. Il n'a pas de télévision, mais il a un lecteur de CD avec des CD sur l'étagère, sur le tapis et dans l'armoire. Il n'a pas d'iPod, mais il a une guitare. So, going through these sentences to decide what's likely or unlikely. First one, Léopold a des cheveux noirs. This is testing you, of course, on remembering this expression. Avoir plus eyes or hair, in this case hair, and color. Il a des cheveux noirs. I would say probable because he is from Dakar, and if you don't know where Dakar is, you'd go to the directions Senegal, which is West Africa. Numéro 2, la chambre est grande. The room is big. Well, it says il loue un petit studio, so peu probable. Numéro 3, il a beaucoup d'affiches. Il a des affiches de Picasso, Matisse, et Magritte. So he has a small studio, but he has 3 different posters, so he has a lot, considering that he is a small place. Il est étudiant à l'école des Beaux-Arts. L'école des Beaux-Arts, there it is. It says it. It's obvious. Il déteste la musique et l'art moderne. He hates music and modern art. Well, he has a lot of CDs, and he has them everywhere. He doesn't have an iPod, but he has a guitar. So probably not probably he hates it, but probably he likes it, which is to say he doesn't hate it. Peu probable. Okay? I hope that was helpful to you guys and that you can come prepared with any other questions that you may have about going through the test. I will see you very soon.